Check 1 2. Check 1 2.
You see that one?
Check 1 2. Check 1 2.
Check on the talk about it. I feel like I'm running on the topics.
Well, no, it's great.
Thank you.
It's all good stuff. Sharona,
You do like the topics?
Yeah.
And the discussions?
Yes.
Okay. All right, good.
I was getting updates from Rick on his trip back here, too. Nate. I was getting updates from Rick, too.
nice.
I was like, everyone's running over, but I know I'm not going to worry about it.
Where are you based, Nathan? Are you in Houston, Texas? Oh, Houston. How do we more chairs? Who's on this panel?
I don't know, see, we'll grab some more chairs with you.
Are you on this one, Nathan?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Well, he is now.
Okay, who else is on the panel?
Because, yeah, Ray, Jay, Ray, George, Eric. Mike. So we'll get one more chair. Two more chairs. I got the tape on the other side. I don't want to take anybody's seat. I'm sorry? Nathan and Jay, because they got stuck at the Hall of Fame. Yeah. And Rick, yeah.
I was going to say the board, just
Good turnout.
Oh, yeah, okay. Can we go ahead and get all the panelists up here, please? Thank you.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
I'm not sitting next to you.
Oh, no, actually, he's just... Okay, who else is on there? George. And Rick is... Oh, Rick's going to be on the end again. He's on the end of the last panel.
He always is.
Yeah,
He's always takes the end spot. The man of the hour, Mr. Rick Collins.
All right.
Should I take the end here?
You always,
You always take the end.
Extra space. I like a little extra.
And George will sit next to me.
Thank you, Dr. T, for getting me this coffee because I need it. Where is it? I was in Europe until yesterday and just flew in. So got in here at 1 in the morning. Crazy, but Germany, France, Netherlands, Belgium, and Switzerland.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started on the final part 2 of our TRT PED panel.
Oh, no, we're going to...
Before we get started, I'm going to let Rick do his disclaimer.
The
traditional disclaimer.
Yes, absolutely.
Here you go.
So, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Rick Collins. I've been describing myself lately as the attorney for the fit and jacked. So if you're fit, jacked, or both fit and jacked, and you have a sort of crisis, I'm sort of the crisis manager from the legal perspective for those things. So the disclaimer we always give is nothing we say is to be construed as legal or medical advice. This is simply for informational purposes only, and nothing creates an attorney-client or doctor-patient relationship with anybody who's on the panel. And with that, we start. Take it away.
All right, thanks, Rick. So, like we did in the past panels, I think, Rick, you already introduced yourself as our resident attorney on the panel. My name is Mike Kosis. I'm the founder of Balance My Hormones, or BMH, we call it in the UK. We're a UK-based clinic and pharmacy called The Hormonist. I also have a YouTube channel called, believe it or not, Balance My Hormones, and you can find this video there, as well as we are now live streaming this video. Hopefully it comes out well, and at some point we will take questions from the audience. As I said in the previous discussion, I've got 27 or more years of experience of actually being a patient on TRT, so it gives me a unique perspective, and I'll be moderating this round table. So why don't we start at the end? There's Rick Collins, and then move on to Dr. Eric.
Again, Eric Fate, hormone optimization and anti-aging physician out of Ohio. Do telemedicine all across the country. I try to focus on muscle medicine, using muscle as the organ of longevity, and helping my patients. It's an honor to be here again. Keep it short.
Yeah, I'm Dr. T from Greece. This is my third Olympia University. I'll be incorporating with Balance My Hormones, Muscular Development, and Anabolics book. And I'm looking forward for a new discussion.
Awesome. You guys, I'm Jay Campbell. I was here yesterday for you guys that were here. So I am an author, subject matter expert, written a bunch of books on hormones and peptides and other things. So I'm grateful to be here.
For those of you guys who haven't heard me on the panel, I'm Elizabeth Yurth. I'm a co-founder and chief medical officer of Boulder Longevity Institute in beautiful Boulder, Colorado, where we work with all sorts of people, from low-level athletes to high-level athletes to non-athletes, to just try and help them optimize health using hormones, using supplements, using peptides, and whatever we can to just keep people healthy.
Nathan Payton, I'm a nutritionist. I'm probably most known within the strength world. We're 8 World's Strongest Man titles, so if you watch TV, a lot of those individuals are my clients. So insulin manipulation is probably the main thing that I utilize for those types of results that you see with those individuals.
All right. So let's start it. So testosterone, you know, it seems like it's more than just a hormone. There are millions of men who have low testosterone suffering from some of the symptoms of low testosterone, from low mood, to lack of libido, to lack of vitality, difficulty sleeping. There are many, many symptoms of low testosterone. Today, we hope to dive deep into some of the areas of testosterone replacement therapy, what it entails, and we've got this wonderful panel to discuss their professional opinions on the use of testosterone replacement therapy. So why don't we get started with our first question, and how testosterone replacement therapy is also changing lives. So one of the first questions I want to ask everyone are, you know, we all hear about testosterone. Everything is lately testosterone this, testosterone that. But what are some of the surprising benefits of testosterone replacement therapy, or even testosterone itself, if you have optimal levels?
So the number one benefit of testosterone replacement or optimization therapy, as I like to coin it, is the improvement in cognition. So most men and women don't realize when they ask me the question all the time, like, hey man, what's your favorite nootropic? Like, what peptide or what supplement is your favorite nootropic? And I always tell them testosterone, because testosterone has incredible benefits and effects in dopamine signaling, improving both short and long-term memory. I mean, it does so many things for the brain. And, you know, a lot of guys and women, of course, you know, who are suffering from a testosterone deficiency. And by the way, that is, I would say, hundreds of millions of people around the world, and the majority of them are undiagnosed. They have no idea. Again, due to what we were talking about yesterday, the environmental decay, blue light, you know, EMF, electromagnetic, dirty electromagnetic frequencies. There's so many things contributing to the decimation of male and female endocrine systems, but it's incredible to see what happens to both men and women who begin testosterone optimization in improving their mood. Okay, a lot of people obviously associate testosterone with libido improvement or improving sexual function, but in fact, that's usually one of the last things that you see. You first see the dopamine signaling improvement, which automatically is going to improve mood. A lot of people who are depressed, who are prescribed SSRIs, which, as you guys know, are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, mood-altering drugs, would be much better served if they were prescribed testosterone earlier on. But again, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of physicians in the world trained on prescribing therapeutic testosterone. But thankfully, due to this panel and due to the worldwide, I would say, onset of people understanding now that there's massive, societal-wide hormonal deficiencies, it's becoming more mainstream now for people to seek this out.
I agree with what Jay said. The mental, emotional aspect is massively important, both for men and for women, and of course everyone knows about some of the other benefits. But the other thing is its effect on reducing inflammation and reducing visceral fat. As everybody knows, obesity, metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance is in epidemic proportions in the country and around the world for that matter. So one of the leading causes of comorbid diseases, a lot of the chronic diseases we see. So the key is really to address that. Obviously, lifestyle, diet, exercise, et cetera. I always harp on, everyone here harps on that. But in terms of testosterone, the mental aspect, the people like, I know I need to get to the gym, but I have no drive or desire, that, as Jay said, will help. But once it takes effect and you're doing the lifestyle issues, you're doing everything at once like we talked about yesterday, reducing that inflammatory process is underappreciated, improving biomarkers, improving your lipids, and then of course helping reduce visceral fat, which everyone has and is a highly inflammatory material in our bodies, right, in our gut, getting that deep visceral fat that causes so many inflammatory processes. It's rampant. It's the big uptick in diabetes and metabolic syndrome. It's crucial for that, and we see more and more of that along with all the other hormones.
I just want to add that there's all the obvious effects that everybody's talked about here, including things like muscle building, cognitive effects. It's extremely cardioprotective. We used to be actually afraid of testosterone for cardiac and say it was not good for the heart. We actually know it's actually very cardioprotective. So there's all these kind of unseen benefits. It's also very immunoprotective. So the immune system is dependent on testosterone levels as well. And it's one of the reasons actually men thrive better a little bit when they're younger than women in terms of autoimmune diseases is because they have more testosterone. So I really think that there's a lot of critical pieces. And I actually, the panel that was up here before, one of the discussions was, should you treat a low testosterone if somebody feels good? And they said no. And I would say yes. Even if you feel great, and I measure your testosterone levels and there's low, there are bad things happening to you that you do not know. And so I do think you want to optimize levels even in somebody who feels healthy. I'm also going to add, because without Allie here, I'm always the only female, that it gets so forgotten in women. And women's testosterone levels drop. We've got only a few women in the crowd, but women's testosterone levels are low really quite young. I mean, a lot of women are 20s, and we talked in the panel we were on earlier in the exhibit hall about birth control pills and what they do to testosterone levels. I mean, they tank testosterone levels, and sometimes even long after you stop birth control pills. For years after, you can see elevations of sex hormone binding globulin, which binds out your testosterone, and you have very, very low levels of testosterone. And that can maintain long after you stop that. So women lots of times get very neglected in this realm. And I think particularly younger women, sometimes older women, it gets thought of at least a little bit, but not in younger women. So we really need to be very cognizant of females, but also I think just optimizing levels in everybody, even in people who do feel well.
I was going to just add to that is with menopause and perimenopause, it's well accepted, more accepted, not everywhere, for women to receive testosterone treatment. But how would, what would you tell other doctors that may want to prescribe testosterone for women who might have suffered from elevated SHBG, low testosterone as a result of birth control? I mean, maybe from a legal point of view or even from doctor to doctor, what would you recommend to tell other doctors to encourage them that this might be a good approach?
Well, gosh, I get this so much because I'll put a woman on testosterone and they'll go see a doctor who says, why are you on testosterone? You don't need testosterone. And, obviously we don't need the levels males do, but without testosterone, women cannot make muscle. They also lose that sort of, the same thing we were talking about earlier, that energy, that drive, that sort of desire for life. So a lot of that depression that you see in perimenopausal women, and even younger women, that's why birth control pills can be linked to depression, is that low testosterone level. So I have this argument constantly with other physicians who are, and me, my background is actually orthopedics, so I came to this from this sort of weird world, so I use testosterone a lot for healing, and my partners would be like, what are you doing? Because it's so critical to healing tissue. So I think that all you can do, because it's sometimes very hard to educate other physicians, is educate patients and hopefully they can understand. So I spend a lot of time educating my patients, and I have given up on a lot of doctors. But if I can educate the patients, the hope is that they can go there and at least have the data to support why they're doing this.
Rick, do you have any legal advice for that?
Well, sure. So, first of all, it's wonderful to have a panel of doctors who are knowledgeable and progressive in their thinking with respect to testosterone. I've dealt through my career with a lot of doctors who are not. And I would say that the standard is doctors are incredibly ill-informed on testosterone. There's a bias against testosterone. I've represented doctors who were practicing, age management practice in a beneficial way, who were targeted by very conservative endocrinology-based medical licensing boards, and were dragged in front of board hearings to explain why they were prescribing testosterone in a very forward-thinking, aggressive kind of way. And so very often, I think if you ask the average general practitioner about, for example, whether testosterone causes prostate cancer, or whether testosterone is beneficial for the heart, the average GP is going to say no. These things are terrible. They'll cause prostate. And so, and I've asked some of my friends who are doctors, not in this world, but in nephrology or other more traditional areas of medicine, what training did you get? How much information did you receive in medical school about testosterone or about anabolic steroids? And it's very, very limited, if any. And so it's wonderful to have progressive thinkers in this area. The problem from a legal perspective is that traditional medicine has not caught up. And so there is some doctors who are very, very aggressive in testosterone replacement therapy do get targeted. And the difference and the problem here in the United States, of course, is that testosterone is a Schedule III controlled substance. And what that means is that it can only be prescribed for a legitimate medical purpose in the usual course of a medical practice, of a professional practice. And testosterone for the purposes of increasing my bench press or building a 20-inch arm is not adequate, is not legal in the United States. And so there's sometimes a gray area that, between what's medical and what is perhaps cosmetic, because one of the byproducts of the medical treatment is a cosmetic improvement. Like Eric just said, you'll lose some body fat, you'll gain muscle and improve your body composition, and that's particularly if you were in a deficient state. So that's a wonderful thing. But to sort of wrap it up, it's wonderful to have forward-thinking medicine, and perhaps whether it's just educating patients for now, but hopefully also educating doctors in the long term, so that kind of stigma that's attached to testosterone that dates back to the 1988 Seoul Olympics when Ben Johnson used anabolic steroids and beat the American Carl Lewis in the '88 Olympics in Seoul. There's this stigma attached to testosterone and anabolic steroids that I think it's time to really revisit.
Absolutely, but even in the UK recently there was a panorama. It's kind of an undercover program that revealed HRT doctors prescribing too much estradiol. So even estrogen, any hormones can be demonized. And in fact, they were saying that the doctor prescribed too high of a dose of estrogen cream. So I can only imagine in the UK if some of our forward-thinking doctors, and that was a forward-thinking doctor, wanted to prescribe testosterone to a woman who wasn't perimenopausal or didn't have the right symptoms of low libido who were menopausal, it might be a bit difficult at this point in time. But everything eventually reaches UK shores, usually about 10 years after it's come into the United States. So I guess to sum up, and if anyone else has any thoughts on surprising benefits of testosterone replacement therapy, we've heard that there are benefits for women. We've heard there are metabolic benefits from Eric, as well as mind benefits, benefits from dopamine from Jay, and Nathan, you also had some benefits to talk about.
So in my world, when you're feeding individuals who might be 6'8", 430 pounds, they're pounding an incredible amount of food. When you're pounding an incredible amount of food, you're tasking the body when it comes to your digestive capabilities. And one of the extreme benefits, again, in my world, how that pertains to the athletes, making sure that the testosterone levels are optimized, is that has an incredible effect on the enzymatic environment of that individual's digestive enzymes system. So it keeps the balance of the digestive enzymes, because testosterone is an amazing governor of that. When your testosterone levels are lower, your digestive enzyme balance tends to either get out of whack or it tends to also drop. Having the right amount of digestive enzymes ensures that your body is properly and efficiently digesting the food that you're eating, especially when it's in large quantities, which has a dramatic impact on your insulin's ability to take those macros and shuttle them off to where they go, because testosterone also helps to increase insulin sensitivity. So when you have all those things working together, it's an incredible companion to make sure that you're getting the benefits out of your diet, whatever type of diet you choose to follow, you get those intended results.
Thanks for that. So, with TRT, and a lot of younger men are now coming forward thinking they might have low testosterone. I mean, it's kind of all around them, whether it's TikTok or if it's YouTube or anywhere on social media. I guess as practitioners, how do you ensure that the testosterone is being appropriately, and maybe that's a bad question because it's making it sound like it's inappropriate to give a young person testosterone, but we talked a little bit about this earlier on other panels. How do we ensure that it's safe and effective for young people, and how do we determine who might best benefit from the testosterone? I mean, obviously, we all know there are lagging testosterone levels across the population, males and females, and younger males are starting to have the symptoms of low testosterone. I mean, is this something that maybe we ought to screen during puberty for? Because many men will be overlooked and have lifelong issues if they have basically testosterone deficiency through puberty. What do you guys think?
So here's what Rick was talking about. Here's where the problem is getting, and you guys are seeing this in your practices now, is that more and more younger people are suffering deficiencies. And it's happening, as you know, and of course, Eric, as you know, to kids literally who are teenagers in their early 20s. And this is all due to social media. Their dopaminergic signal pathways are being hijacked by YouTube, by porn, by video games. I mean, all the blue light frequencies that they're constantly absorbed in and bathed in. And a lot of these kids today, I mean, again, the statistics are shocking. I tell people this all the time, and people don't even believe this, but in 2022 and 2023, 50% of males in the United States and Canada, 50%, you guys can fact check me on this, did not have sex one time with another person, male or female. So we have this lost generation of both men and, of course, the women, because if they're not having sex, if the men aren't having sex, they don't have anybody to have sex with. It's really bizarre, and that's what we're seeing. And so their issue now is, as Rick said, the traditional medicine has not caught up to the aspect that you can treat a younger person with therapeutic testosterone. And I'll let you guys talk to what you can do, obviously, because there are adjuvants like Clomid and HCG and all the other things. But it's really becoming difficult for a physician in today's day and age to truly give the younger person the therapy that they require or ultimately desire because of the legal reasons of treating someone who's so young.
Well, I think that in answer to the question, you're right, Jay, that we're seeing this drop in hormones very early. And I'll tell you, COVID did a number of this, as did the COVID vaccine, that actually really tanked people's levels, sustained. We're seeing a lot of sustained low levels. I'm an advocate for early screening of everything. I think everybody should be starting to test their labs at a young age. I think that nobody starts thinking about their health until they're 50, and the problem is that there's a lot of damage done in that time. In my ideal world, the 18-year-olds should know what their levels are. Even if they're good, now we have a nice baseline so that 10 years from now, if they've dropped, well, this is what I used to be, right? And you should be staying at those levels. So I'm an advocate for everybody should know their lipid profiles early. They should know what their thyroid is early. They should know what their CBC, their CMP. I'm an advocate for everybody should have labs done early, and they should be following them on a regular basis. We have the ability to get the data, and get it young when you can actually intervene early before damage is done. Prevention is always better than trying to play catch-up. I don't think people start doing that until it's too late. As far as treating young people, I think obviously the first thing is trying to get their health back, which would be trying to get them to eat well, stop alcohol, get outside, do those things, as opposed to just throwing them all in testosterone. The problem is, how do you do that? I have 5 kids who are all sitting here, and I can tell you, trying to have a conversation with them about not drinking in college, they're like, how do you do that, right? Right? It's a very hard discussion to have. That's what college is, right? You go and you party and you drink and you eat pizza and you eat badly. So how do we work with these people sensibly to try and do things that are going to help their health? But I do think that we're finding young people where you do have to engage in treatment, and that's where you can use HCG, you can use enclomiphene, and hopefully now with this new oral testosterone, Kysotrex, which has no effect on testicular function, it might be a nice option to use a low-dose Kysotrex with these people. This is a new oral testosterone that does not affect testicular function, that does not affect liver, and is very gets nice levels that will just boost them up a little bit. So I think there's going to be options. I don't think it should ever be the first go-to. The problem is, and that can be a whole nother discussion, how do you get young people to start attending to that? I don't know.
You mentioned the oral testosterone. A couple of years ago, there was talk about the nasal testosterone also wouldn't lower the HPTA axis. And essentially, you can have your cake and eat it, if meaning your pituitary is still producing testosterone, and then the nasal one you would apply. Some people would say it would get closer to the brain, and you get some of the benefits of the testosterone. What do you think about the nasal testosterone as well?
Eric, go ahead.
No, I've not really used much of the nasal, but I'm excited about the oral form that you're talking about, Betsy, and I agree with what they both said about the modern society, and for me, as a for what I like to do it, and as a former ER doc, I always like to have options A, B, and C, and with the younger people, like Betsy said, there's options. Clomid or HCG or this new formulation, but sometimes it's just a root cause thing, right? It might be one inciting event, especially when you're younger. Someone had an accident or they had an illness or something, and we can fix that. As with everything, is there an underlying cause? Let's fix that, and boom, we kind of reset them, and maybe they're good. Or it might be a lifestyle issue that needs to be addressed aggressively. But there are, I think we're all seeing this, more and more people where that is being done, but they still might need treatment. So I think the trend, as Jay said, the trend is lower, early. I'm seeing this all the time. Lower numbers, more and more symptomatic. So it may merit that conversation. But I think for me, I like to start with an early plan of saving testosterone for last and say, okay, we tried all this and it didn't work. Now we need to reboot you and maybe take you off it or maybe continue. But now we have some better options. So I think that's a good way to do it.
So I have used the nasal testosterone in my patients. It's hard to get levels up very much. I have not used it in younger patients. Maybe that would be a good place for them. It's also pretty uncomfortable. Guys feel like it kind of burns their nose and it feels like it drips out of their nose a lot. So I didn't get a lot of good use of it. People didn't like it very much. But I have tried it. I was actually pretty enthused by it. I think it still might be a nice option for some people. I'm going to add to what Eric said on the young people. One of the things to remember is head, because you were talking about the pituitary, is even mild head injury. So any of you guys who played football or have had multiple concussions, the pituitary does get damaged. You see what's called empty sella syndrome. The pituitary is no longer actually cueing the testicles to make testosterone. So that's actually a really good group to keep in mind, because a lot more people now, we're seeing these football players who have chronic head injuries, or any of these athletes who have chronic head injuries. Anybody who's had chronic head trauma very often at a very young age has low testosterone.
Yeah, I believe the main hesitation of young people to follow TRT is the lifetime commitment and the thing that they're kind of scared they have to follow this for the rest of their lives. And unfortunately, urologists are not aware of that, and they tell them, oh, you're going to be infertile and sterilized, because they're not aware, obviously, by the implementation of HCG. And yes, if you take testosterone, the testicles will shrink, will diminish in size. The point is you can maintain fertility by the use of HCG, and urologists are not aware of this. And I'm the living example that at 50, 10 years now, testosterone was able to become a father. So the lack of knowledge, and this is out of knowledge, then the prejudice, skepticism, and the negativity makes them to avoid the initiation of TRT in young people.
That's a good point, George. So that leads me into the other question is, in a lot of men, or even women, mostly men in this regard, there's an uncertainty about the long-term commitment to TRT. And I think in the past this was more so, and now it's becoming a bit more common, or maybe it's just because I'm so ingrained into this field that I just think everyone thinks like me. And I was one of those young people at 22 when I started TRT, and it wasn't common then, maybe for older men, but not for younger men to be on testosterone, and I had multiple tests done. But I guess the question is, what, as practitioners and advocates, can we say to young people, or anyone starting TRT, about this lifelong commitment, and because that can be quite scary, any sort of long-term commitment to be on a treatment. So anyway, my point of view is I don't want to be thinking of it as being a sick patient.
When they go to the endocrinologist and they say, oh, you need to take T4 for the rest of your life, are there any hesitations there? No. They're taking thyroid because every kind of hypo means you have the deficiency, you have to take it for the rest of your life, okay? So there's no hesitation over thyroid. Why then not take testosterone?
Right, we get this with all hormones, right? I mean, I get a lot of women who I put on hormones, testosterone, estrogen, and then their doctor's like, well, you're too old, you don't need it anymore. And it's like, so yes, you will, this is a commitment, just like everything you're going to do to try and stay young is going to be trying to maintain these levels we had when we were 18 and trying to maintain them our whole life. That is going to be a lifelong commitment. I will stop my hormones when I die, and that's, and not before that. And I think that's what everybody should do, because you have to maintain those levels to maintain health. So it's silly to say, well, I have to do this for the rest of my life. Yes, you do, just like you have to eat healthy for the rest of your life and exercise for the rest of your life and do all those other things. Maybe a pain in the butt, but you have to.
I think for any person, and obviously there's plenty of people in this room and everyone sitting up on this stage or panel right now, the difference between being on testosterone and optimized on testosterone and not be is so great that very few of us, when experiencing that benefit, would ever think, oh, the matrix may collapse and, we might get hit by an EMP. Do you know how many times people have messaged me in the last 10 years where they're like, dude, what happens if I can't get my testosterone? And I'm like, well, you're going to have to save up for a rainy day, bro. But no, I mean, the truth is that the reality is that you're not going to ever look at it as like, oh, I have to be on this the rest of my life. You're going to actually be grateful when you look in the mirror every day and say, oh my God, I'm so glad that I'm on this, because I know what I felt like previous to this. I felt like dog, you know what? And now I feel amazing. Now, obviously, it's important for you guys out there that are not on testosterone or thinking about it, and again, whether you're male or female, that you work with a physician of the caliber that understands how to do it, because as Rick was saying earlier, 95% of doctors have absolutely no idea how to get you optimized on testosterone. And that includes the majority of them, as you know, that have clinics, okay? Because these guys that are on the corner that are charging you $199 to get your hormones optimized likely have no idea what they're doing. So you have to be very, very cautious and prudent and intelligent and investigative and discerning before you choose who to work with. And again, ask that guy down there at the end. He can talk to you about the stories of people that do things that they shouldn't be doing as doctors. So it's critically important, but I always look at it as, again, the glass half full scenario. It's like, I want to be on testosterone, and I'm going to do everything in my power from an abundance mindset to be continually on testosterone until I die, because the lack of being on testosterone sucks.
Just to follow up on that, hey, you do this and you're going to have to do it for the rest of your life. I remember when I was young, I was in college, I was competing in bodybuilding, so I was all jacked up and muscular. I remember people saying to me, well, if you build that much muscle, you're going to have to do this for the rest of your life. You're going to have to keep training, or it's all going to turn to fat. Not that we know muscle doesn't turn to fat, but that was the belief at the time. And I'm like, okay, well, then yeah, I'll do this for the rest of my life. And if you enjoy doing it and you feel good about it, what's the problem? The other thing is we've talked a little bit about, for example, pituitary issues in young people and low testosterone that may be the result of some trauma. But most people who are on testosterone are on it because as we get older, our testosterone levels naturally diminish. And this is, I hear people say, well, that's what nature intended, right? So why don't you just go the natural route? Just do what nature intended. And I look at this, I guess, from an evolutionary perspective and say that once we've passed our breeding years and our child rearing years, which may be till child is 7 or 10 or something like that, and can survive on its own, and this is true of all species, right? Nature has very little interest in us. We become a drain on the resources, right? And so our testosterone levels begin to diminish, our hair begins to fall out, our teeth begin to fall out, our fat gets more, our muscle mass begins to go away, because it's nature's way of easing us into the grave, right, for the dirt nap. So to me, nature on an individual level has no interest in us certainly past the age of 40 or 50. Their interest, nature's interest, is in the next generation and the continuation of the gene. So I guess you could say, well, go along with what nature intends. Certainly it's good for the species, but as an individual, I don't think that's, not necessarily what most people want to do. And so to fight nature's intent, to fight it by, whether it's by continuing to train, by continuing to eat right, by continuing to take whatever medicines or therapies may help to extend and prolong that youthful vigor, seems to me to make the most sense.
That's aging, and aging is a disease.
Right.
That's aging equals aging, and aging is a disease, and age management means to restore the hormones, and we age because the hormones decline.
Very well said. Though some would argue, not to make it too controversial, that the testosterone level that one has is a reflection of your generalized health, and if you're not as healthy, then your testosterone level is going to be lower. I don't take that point of view, because there are many people beyond our control. Whilst there are some people who aren't living a healthy life, there are environmental toxins and these other this lifestyle that we are part of. And how can you explain such a large number of people having lower levels of fertility and testosterone levels? Something is going on, something's amiss, and other hormones as well. So I don't know if anyone wanted to comment.
The other thing I'd like to hear some of the doctors speak on, and this doesn't come up very often other than in these panels, is the shifting standards of what is considered low testosterone. So for example, what was considered the range of normal testosterone levels 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, compared to now. I'd like to hear some talk about that.
Mine was, my blood panel in 1995, 96, it was 450 to 1,080, so.
Yeah, I've been in practice now in age management, doing it almost 20 years. And even in that span of time, they've shifted 50% down. So it's dropped, the norms have dropped 50% lower. And that's what the norm is now. So this has been a dramatic change. Even in my, in my career, 20 years is pretty long, but it's not that long. And to see this drop 50%, so now what would have actually been a low normal is the high end of what is considered normal now, which is ridiculous. There's no reason that our norms should be changing. The norms are changing because norms are based on what most of the population is, and most of the population, unfortunately, is unhealthy and hormonally unsound. And we need to be basing them instead on what a true healthy level was in our grandparents, where they weren't exposed to environmental toxins and they were actually outside in the sun and doing things. And I would venture to say it was probably triple what they are now.
Yeah, we discussed this last year, and we said that the generation of our fathers had higher testosterone than this generation, and our grandfathers of our fathers And basically, there's a decline process. 50 years ago, the range was between 500 and 1,500. And now we compromise with the decline process. And let's say now you're considered as hypogonadic with 199. And we know that lousy lifestyle becomes below 400 and symptoms below 350. And basically, in medicine, we should treat symptoms and not numbers. We're more than just a number on a bloody piece of paper. And it's pathetic. Doctors saying at 199 I'll prescribe you, but at 201 I'll not prescribe you. So it's more than that, okay? We need to see out of the box.
And to George's point as well, there's an incredible bias that goes on visually when it comes to that. And ironically, the numbers, so you talk about 199, a very large, well-known professional athlete who you would visually look at and think that, wow, this guy must be jacked to the moon. You know, he looks borderline like Mr. Olympia, except he's got a belly. That individual, 100% on my dime, lifetime natural. He's genetically an absolute freak, but if you saw his parents, it starts to make a lot of sense because dad is built like a barrel, big, jacked individual who's worked hard his whole life. His grandpa is even more of a big, barrel-y man than he is. There's genetic components there that are in play. Various blood tests on him just almost to humor individuals because he had something else going on, and the doctors basically refused to test his testosterone levels because they said, look at the size of you. You're 340 pounds, 6'4", and you've got an 1,100-pound deadlift, and you want to tell me that I should check your testosterone levels? His testosterone levels were 188. They refused to treat him, convinced he was a liar. They checked him 90 days, another 90 days, another 90 days. Almost a full year went by of him getting no treatment, no relief for his medical condition. He never tested above that 188. Each subsequent 90-day test, he went down a little bit. I think the second one was like 183. He ended up somewhere in the low 170s before finally the physicians were like, well, I guess we should look a little deeper here. Now, when they did check him, what they did discover is that he has a genetically highly elevated level of growth hormone. His body cranks it out left and right. But that's why his family's genetics also look the way that they do. So you took an individual who had a medical condition, could not get treatment because of a visual bias based on the physicians, and that shows you kind of the problems with the way that the situation is assessed. Because as George said, years ago, I mean, if you were under 400, you'd have been immediately prescribed. And now 188 is considered, you're close enough to the bottom, that counts. So.
Yeah, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I think there's two things. One is the medical community, and the other one is there's a combination of politics and societal accommodation, right? It's kind of like, you go to the airport, the planes, well, let's make the seats bigger because people are bigger. Or, the joke about the dad bod, it's okay. It's like, it's not healthy, it's not normal. And the norms, as everyone said, has been shifting down. I was at a conference a couple weeks ago, one of the physicians lecturing was saying, I probably like a lot of people grew up in the 70s and 80s, and they said back in the 80s, the high end of normal is almost 2,000, whereas now it keeps creeping down, again, just to accommodate, quote unquote, what's normal. It's really accommodating what's a sick population. Right. And then the other part is just the whole medical community. I mean, back in 100-something years ago, doctors did what a lot of us do, is treat based on symptoms. We actually examined the patient and talked to them. We didn't rely on lab work, whereas over time it shifted away where doctors kind of like forgot about how the art of the exam and history taking and relied on blood tests, which we all know are not always conducive. Thyroid's a classic example. Oh, your tests are normal. Yeah, but I'm cold and I'm constipated, I'm gaining weight and I'm tired. And, well, you got a thyroid condition. It doesn't matter what the labs say. Let's treat the patient, not the numbers. So, and the same thing with testosterone. So it's just this whole societal shift and accommodation, which is not appropriate, and I think everyone here agrees with that.
So we're going to do one more question, and then we'll take questions from the people in the audience as well as those who are watching live. But the last question, because the topic was TRT, but a little bit about other things, and beyond testosterone, what can be added to treatment? What is added to treatment, or is it recommended to add anything else to treatment besides testosterone to, I guess, improve one's health in the areas of testosterone deficiency or other hormonal deficiencies?
Yeah, this is called HRT. HRT mainly refers to women because women get estrogen, progesterone, pregnenolone, DHEA, perhaps testosterone. But men, it's either testosterone or not, I mean, this is what Fatini told us in an interview. But you can maintain fertility with HCG. You can improve cognitive function with DHT or mysterol and proviron. You can add also pregnenolone that calms down the nervous system because it metabolizes the progesterone. You can also use DHA, of course, because it's a very basic steroid molecule after the 40s. And you can add for the sake of age management, though it's very progressive, GH.
I know, Dr. Yurth, you had mentioned once that DHA might not be such a good option for men. Do you still agree with that?
I think you have to be careful with DHEA in men. Very oftentimes you'll see it convert to 4-hydroxyestrone. So we run urine metabolite testing, and DHEA unfortunately can convert down to an estrogenic pathway in some men, depending on your genetics. You can use things like pregnenolone to help block that. We were talking, Dave and I were talking about earlier about the importance of progesterone in men. It gets very forgotten in men, but progesterone is actually very valuable to men from an immune perspective, from a joint perspective, from a brain perspective. So you use pregnenolone to raise progesterone levels. I sometimes even use progesterone on my men at a very, very small dose. It helps them sleep, helps them with anxiety. So I am cautious with DHEA. I don't use it nearly as much because of its conversion into 4-hydroxyestrone. So if you monitor metabolites. So DIM blocks later, so it's going to block 4-hydroxyestrone a little bit, but it's a better blocker of the CYP pathway that goes into 16-hydroxyestrone than 4-hydroxyestrone. You can use things like calcium D-glucarate to help eliminate 4-hydroxyestrone. DIM works a little bit, but it's working to block 16 more than 4. It helps, but you've got to follow metabolites and see. And I would say about half my men put on DHEA will convert into 4-hydroxyestrone, even on DIM. And I use DIM on almost all my men.
Concerned about the prostate?
And I'm concerned about prostate cancer, yes.
Not much to add to that. I think the biggest thing is, we talked about this earlier, is, what else can you add? Well, two things: everything, and it depends, right? I mean, everything is meaning all the stuff we all talk about. I mean, you got to have the lifestyle dialed in: sleep, stress reduction, exercising, proper nutrition, community, gratitude, helping other people, spirituality, community, all these things that we talk about ad nauseum. And then it depends, because everybody's different. I mean, can you take every supplement and every peptide on top? Of course, but not everybody needs that. What do they need? What are their symptoms? What are they looking to? I always try to individualize my treatment, as does everybody here. What exactly do you need? Let's find the right tool for the job, not just throw everything at you. But the lifestyle, all that stuff, everybody needs that. We all need that. But everything else, it just kind of depends on the situation.
All right. Now, one of the panelists talked about earlier visual. I think, Nathan, you mentioned, visually looking at a patient and saying, "Oh, you've got too much testosterone." That actually happened to me once. We know in Scandinavia, they look at people and say, "Oh, you're too much testosterone. We're going to chase you back home and see if you've got a legal prescription for that." So in light of this view between the doctors, is telemedicine maybe a better way to go? But yet in the US, they may be taking away telemedicine. And obviously telemedicine can mean a lot of things. It could be a phone call where you wouldn't see the patient, or it would be a video call. And there is a thought that, for men and women who are looking for health care, and maybe the cost of fuel is going up, you don't want to drive to your doctor's, you're working from home. There are some benefits, even in the psychiatric care, about having telemedicine. Why is it being taken away, or potentially being taken away? And we thought, Rick, since you know a little bit about this, you might be able to answer.
So, it's testosterone maybe shouldn't be a controlled substance in the first place, but it is, and it's been since 1990. And because of that status as Schedule III controlled substance, there's limitations and restrictions by the Drug Enforcement Administration with the DEA controls. And so there was a law that was put into place a few years ago, not because of testosterone, but because of opiates, where a kid got a hold of some opiates online from a clinic that was really just a pill mill, and he overdosed and died as a result of getting these opiates. And so a law was put into place to require that before you get a controlled substance prescription in the US, there has to be a physical examination, an in-person evaluation of the patient. It wasn't intended for TRT. TRT just kind of gets sucked into it because testosterone's a controlled substance. And when there was the national health emergency that we all know from 2020, that law was relaxed for enforcement purposes, which enabled kind of online TRT clinics to begin to help patients who need testosterone without actually having to see the patient or examine the patient before the prescription was approved. And there was certainly a lot of pushback when the DEA said, well, we're going to take that rule away because the health emergency is over now. And we're still in a place where it is not yet taken away, so there's still this sort of relaxed enforcement. That is going to kind of expire at the end of December of this year. And what it will go back to is yet to be determined. If that's an area of interest, I'm very active on Instagram, Rick Collins ESQ, and I try to keep people apprised of the new developments. And there's mixed feelings about this, right? I mean, there's an argument that to be on TRT, there should be some kind of physical examination, or at least a doctor-patient relationship. You know, I'm aware of some clinics that are simply a situation where you go online, you have a, interaction with somebody who's probably a bodybuilder and not really a person of medical training, and a doctor kind of writes a prescription without ever actually interacting with you. And I'm not sure that is a good thing. Certainly, on the other hand, there are, should testosterone be looked at in the same way as opiates to sort of screen out the person who's looking to abuse it? I don't know, and that's certainly a subject that I think we're kind of wrestling with, as in part because testosterone doesn't really fit in the same box of the methamphetamines and the opiates and the cocaine and the heroin that form the psychoactive drugs that are used for psychoactive effects. Virtually nobody that I've ever met is using testosterone to get high or to have some sort of fix aspect. They're looking at for at worst in the black market sense to make cosmetic changes to the way they look.
I mean, this just for people watching or in the audience and watching at home, this is essentially a USA type of issue. In Europe, especially the United Kingdom, I mean, especially during the pandemic, the NHS, the National Health Service, had many of the doctors doing telemedicine. In fact, they would just pick up the phone and call you, and they still do. And that's absolutely acceptable and actually preferable and maybe more cost effective for both the patient, where they don't have to pay for parking and transportation to get to the clinic. And so there are benefits of healthcare that's done online. I could just say at our clinic at Balance My Hormones, we have different levels of screening. We have case managers that support. Some of them are ex-doctors and nurses, and then they develop that relationship through a Zoom call, and they have repeated calls with that. I think that's a better way. There is something that they do with online pharmacies, both in the UK, for low-risk medications where they can fill out a questionnaire and then have that filled. But even those, we prefer to have them see the doctor.
So I love Rick. We're very good friends. And that was an amazing answer, but I'm not going to let him get off that easy. So Rick, what do you think is going to happen at the end of this year, going into next year? And I'll set it up for all of us, right, or every one of the persons in this room, because I would say 50% of you guys are probably working with a doctor via telemedicine, whether they're in your market or out of your market. How do you think that's going to affect the massive population in say, the United States that will have an issue potentially with their doctor not being able to prescribe to them anymore?
Right. So I think, like in most things, there's a compromise, and I think that's what's going to happen. A lot of the pushback against the taking away of that more relaxed interpretation was not really from the TRT clinic, perspective, or TRT in general. It was really people who are treating addiction specialists who are saying, hey, there are people in remote rural areas who can't, come to their doctor, and they really need this. So I think ultimately there'll be some compromise, and it may involve Zoom. It may involve maybe seeing a local doctor and allowing that doctor's evaluation so that somebody sees the patient in person, maybe not the one who prescribes, maybe not the specialist. So I think there'll ultimately be some sort of, workaround that will exist. I think there is probably some argument that to be on testosterone, there should be maybe some physical examination involved, that you don't have a prostate the size of a cantaloupe, let's say, or, that you don't have some massive growth on your testes or something like that. There's probably some benefit to that also, to avoid fraud situations where it's a 17 or 16-year-old who's posing as a 30-year-old, and unless there's something more than just an online clicking of a mouse pad, that it might get into the wrong hands. So some screening is appropriate, I think, but I do think that the workaround will probably be primarily from the addiction community and not so much from the TRT community, which again, testosterone is sort of just riding the coattails of other controlled substances. We've talked about this, I think, last year. The first time I've ever seen, years ago, my clients would say, Rick, will there ever come a time when testosterone is not a controlled substance, when we become more enlightened and we recognize that maybe the stigma of attaching it to other drugs of abuse and addiction and dependency doesn't make sense. And I would have said, I don't think so, except that there were 2 United States senators just a couple of years ago who wrote a letter to the Biden administration urging that testosterone be removed from the Controlled Substances Act. And every bodybuilder cheered to hear that. But it wasn't really about bodybuilding, and it wasn't really even about TRT. It was about people who are born female but want to transition to male or simply be more masculine along the gender spectrum, and who have gender dysphoria, and that there's an inherent discriminatory situation where if you're born female seeking to be male, you have all of the red tape of controlled substance status to get the hormone you need. But if you're born male and seeking to become female, well, then estrogen is not a controlled substance, so you don't have, so it's a completely inequitable situation. And so it didn't go anywhere to my knowledge, but it's interesting that there was some effort to remove testosterone from that status.
That doesn't surprise me. Wasn't Senator Biden the one that helped enact the Anabolic Steroid Control Act in the 90s?
Yes, it was then Senator Joe Biden who declared that steroids were un-American, and that the only solution to doping in sports would be to treat it like methamphetamine, cocaine, and heroin.
All right, so listen, we're going to now take some questions from the audience. And do we have any questions from YouTube?
We have one question and a comment that says, I just started TRT 4 months ago. I love it. And who's Chase?
I don't know, maybe that's just it. So any other questions? Oh.
Who's Chase?
All right, well then, anyone for questions from the audience? In the back, yeah. No, go ahead. Okay, so what are the endocrine disruptors that we should avoid, or the?
Ones you guys are worried about that we can in our day-to-day lives avoid, and then 2, is there any trends that are hopeful?
Okay, who wants to go?
Yeah, I mean, all of them. Avoid all of them. Biggest things are, the phthalates, the xenoestrogens, there's so many. I can't even list them all. But the typical trend is, of course, avoid biggest things like plastics, all the microplastics everywhere, the processed foods, the excessive, chemicals in the food. You really have to really read the labels on everything because they've changed a lot of the rules about that in terms of what you're looking for. People, of course, talk about, fluoride in toothpaste and, all the different cosmetics, your soaps, your shampoos, your perfumes, et cetera, your hair products. Get a filter for your water, filter for your air, drink out of glass, store everything in glass, don't cook plastic things in plastic in the microwaves, detoxification on a regular basis, whether it's sauna therapy, et cetera. So, I mean, there's a probably 45-minute discussion on just this, but those are the basics of it right there. But we could talk a lot, but I know we're trying to keep it short, but that's my quick 2 cents.
Just real quick, weed and alcohol in young people is an absolute endocrine disruptor beyond people's comprehension. I mean, there's so many young people today smoking weed, and that's just flooring their endocrine system. I mean, it's just bad. And there's so many lies out there. People talk about, weed is natural, bro. It's good for you. Weed is not good for you, right? So if that's what you're doing, I don't think there's anyone in this room that's abusing weed. But then the same thing with alcohol. I mean, alcohol is a massive depressant, right? So these things, if you're taking them and abusing them, are affecting your endocrine system and obviously dropping your hormone levels.
Okay. Any other? Do we answer all the questions?
Can I just ask Rick a question about, is there any legislation that you see going on to try and get these endocrine disruptors out of our...
No, and I guess I guess to follow up a little bit, one thing that might be interesting on the issue of how we look at performance enhancement in sport, there is now a scheduled event called the Enhanced Games that is being floated around as something that may occur next year. And it would be an alternative to the traditional Olympics with all of the standard drug testing that goes on to make sure that athletes aren't taking anything that might be problematic, even though we sometimes realize that many of them are, and people like Lance Armstrong who got away with it for years. And so the Enhanced Games is a new concept that is basically saying, let the athletes do what they want, and let the athletes take what they want, as much equally amount or as much or as little as they want, and that we will then find out what are the limits of the human abilities and capacities, because genetics will always play a role, training will always play a role, hard work will always play a role. Let them then add whatever else they want on, and there's going to be safeguards, purportedly will be safeguards put in place with medical testing and medical oversight. I don't know how far that will go, but it's interesting because there's a lot of interest in it. I don't know whether corporate America will buy in for the sponsorships that would be required. But certainly from the people that I talk to, there's huge intrigue in the idea of, what could happen, what records could be broken, how far can the human body go? And I think there's hope that some of the research that comes out of this will help ordinary people to maybe find new ways of extending health and performance into the long term.
I think, and I just wanted to ask this to Nathan along that line, so I see a lot of professional athletes who have low testosterone levels, and I can't treat them. I mean, you probably run into that. Like, what do? Do you tell them to get out of their sport?
No. When it comes to a situation like that, and the question also that you had regarding is there any trends that we see that maybe give us hope that things could maybe kind of reverse away. To that note, there's a lot of athletes that have started to, and I guess I would call it a trend, take note in what they eat. And I know you may find that surprising or it sounds ridiculous. 95% of the athletes that are professionals in every sport you can think of, up until maybe 5 years ago, there was zero paying attention on what they actually eat on a daily basis and how it actually might affect them. What you were seeing professionally was genetics. As Rick had just mentioned, you were seeing natural genetics at its finest display with zero manipulation, bare bones. So that's the baseline. everything that you've seen up until about the last 5 years. You then saw a push where Tom Brady became very, very vocal about talking about how he ate and the reason why he would go about X, Y, Z in order for either his longevity or his performance. Whether or not you agree with his chosen diet, that's another topic. But I've also worked with NFL guys like Saquon Barkley, individuals who came to me and had never done diets before. I've also done, well, let me rephrase that. I had a consult with an individual who was debated to be the #1 draft pick in the NFL, and the knock against him was size. And I found that to be unbelievable because you are at an incredible university surrounded with an incredible team of dietitians, and I found it incredible that you were slipping through the cracks with no one paying attention to how you were eating or what was going on with that when there's a team of dietitians. I've been in the NFL locker rooms as well. It's like a Cracker Barrel or some sort of buffet set out, and they pick and choose what they want. The caveat being they have no idea what they should pick or why or how much. It's just there, like you're at the world's biggest wedding, and they pick 1 of this and 3 of these, and oh, that looks good. But they're all eating either randomly, or your punter is eating the same as your defensive end, or your linebacker is eating the same as your star quarterback, so on and so forth. All of that makes no sense whatsoever. So some of these players took that initiative to look into things on their own. To the draft pick that we were discussing, having a conversation with him and his agent, my worst fears came to fruition. The concept of what to eat, why, and even how he would go about determining what he should eat on a daily basis was literally the questions being asked of me. Keep in mind, he's gone through a university that has invested millions in him as an athlete there for that campus, with the dietitians, with their food structure that they have there, and there was zero comprehension or understanding of the importance. And when I started talking about all the cognitive impacts, as I were obviously focused on the size, since that's what the scouts have been emphasizing, when I started talking about the cognitive benefits, especially at the particular position that he played, meaning he had to be able to survey the field with incredible accuracy and immediacy, that was completely lost on how nutrition was going to affect his cognitive performance or the way that he would relay and his timing of his nervous system. So the trend now, at least the athletes are starting to look outside the box. It's very interesting to me that they have to step outside of their NFL locker rooms or even collegiate still in order to find specific guidance to them as an individual to try to peak and maximize what their genetics can actually do. Because all we've seen in sports for all these years, except for about the last 5, is literally what human genetics has evolved to. So now you're seeing how nutrition can have such a key play. You know, things like the dietary fats, especially on a young athlete who's constantly tearing their body down, that's what's signaling the hormone response in the body to repair itself and how efficiently it can, besides the protein, of course. So that will be a trend that I think is definitely a huge positive and that's coming along that I hope certainly continues to get far more refined.
Well said. So any other questions, either online, any more online, or we'll get your question? While you're doing that, we'll take the question from the gentleman in the front, yeah?
I have a question. What is the benefit or harm for TRT on the elderly? Let's say people that are over 75.
So is there any benefit or harm from starting TRT after the age of 70 or 75? Could there be a potential harm, maybe from some of our doctors? Any thoughts on?
I had a case of a 70-year-old guy. I mean, he was receiving testosterone in his 70s, and he visualized dramatic improvement in not just sex drive, but mentally as well. And fatigue was gone, better mood. And the concern about the prostate, we know that now Mogetale believes that low testosterone leads to prostatitis and prostatic cancer. And frankly, how many men are using testosterone worldwide? 1%? We hear about prostate cancer for men who are not taking testosterone. And bodybuilders, which is the worst example of testosterone steroid abuse, are not suffering from prostate cancer.
I've seen hundreds of men, if not thousands, through my just interaction with people online, of men who've started over the age of 65 and women who've started over the age of 65, and only positive benefits can come. Now, obviously, the level of that person, the inflammation of that person, the conditioning of that person always plays a role. But, I mean, testosterone given to elderly people is 99.9% of the time going to be beneficial.
Any other questions?
So I hear all these benefits about testosterone, but I'm a kid who doesn't know much, and I'm like, okay, now how do I actually go about implementing these things in my life, especially now that, you hear that a lot of doctors aren't knowledgeable about testosterone. How do you go and find those doctors that are, or how do you take a step in that direction? I know blood panels are probably a great way to start, but is there a roadmap?
So the question is, is a young man or a young person, are they watching, or you want to know how do I go about, or any adult for that matter, how do I go about, we have talked a little bit about the deficiencies in the traditional medical community, I'll leave it like that may not be as queued up on this topic, but I think that you can still use the medical system, especially in the USA, where you've got this health insurance, but there are also cash-based options to get blood testing, at least. I think that's a starting point, finding either through your GP or family practitioner to get that blood test, or finding one of these other online sources to get a start. I know I said that before. But other options would be obviously looking into things like diet and nutrition, etc. But from a medical point of view, I think you should always start there, and not to self-medicate necessarily. I mean, being aware and being your own advocate, yes, but not going that route. I'll let Jay answer.
I mean, I'm going to disagree with him, and I love him, but in the United States, if you go to a HMO or PPO doctor, you're effed up. You're not going to get advice. They're not even going to test for your hormones because they don't even know how to read your blood work anyway. So in truth, I'm going to agree with him. You have to educate yourself. We talked about this yesterday. You have to become the proactive scientist of your own health. Whether you're 18, 20, 30, 40, 50, you have to educate yourself. There's no one out there looking at your medical records to see if you have a testosterone deficiency. But to also answer your question, there's a lot of amazing information online. And you can find it, simply searching. I mean, I always think of young people today, they can literally ask the screen for the answer. When we were growing up, we had to go to the Dewey Decimal System and pull out the card catalog, to search for information. So, but truthfully, the microfiche, exactly. But truthfully, it's also hard to find good information because there's a lot of nonsense. As I said yesterday in one of the panels, the signal to noise ratio, the noise is a lot higher than the signal. But to wind it back to what he was saying, of course, there are obviously educated people in this room and a lot of educated people in society that you can reach out to. I mean, there's plenty of people on social media that you could probably send a message to, and you listen to their content and say, hey, where could I start? But the best step, as he said, is always to find out your lab panels. What your mom said a little while ago. The most important thing is to understand what you're working with, because you can't actually predict or progress if you don't know what your baseline is.
I think I was coming from the point of view, you know what I'm saying, that, I mean, look, you're weighing cost and benefit, right? So, in the UK, many people try to go to their GP and ask for a blood test because it's not free because you pay for it through tax, but you can at least go that route. But then you wait a long time before you get the test. And so in the UK, for instance, they can come to our clinic, they can order online their blood tests, they don't need to have a doctor's referral for it. So there are options, and I know there are options like that. I think in the US, I think Nelson, friend Nelson Virgil has discounted labs you can order online. There are many other
private MD labs.
Other private MD labs and things like that where you can order labs as a first port of call, and then obviously seek the professionals in your home country where those services are available.
That's the best advice, is get your labs done and then talk to somebody who's an expert in your circle. and maybe they can help you read them before you even go to a doctor, because a lot of people that don't have a deficiency don't need to go to the doctor, so you can save yourself the money. So become intelligent on how to actually get labs, and there's many, many options.
Was there a question from the online again, or any more from Chase?
Is that a person?
I don't know. Anyone else in the audience have a question? And then,
yeah.
Go.
I do have a quick one. You were talking a lot about just noise and educating yourself, especially with social media these days, especially growing up in such an environment where you can have so much information that it's almost too much information. So I guess it's sort of a multifaceted question and concept of, A, how is what is the best method of weeding out the noise in terms of educating yourself? Because if you don't have, I guess, the resources to go and find your community doctor or ask your mom, what's the best way to educate yourself knowing that there's a lot of things that are false out there? And B, what are the biggest misconceptions that you guys hear that are generalizations that you know to be false that right here, right now, you know you can discuss?
Anyone?
Come on, Eric.
So
Just reach out to one of us now.
Yeah, well, I would say right here, this is a great place to start. So all of them are online, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, whatever. Start right here, and you'll start getting good information, and then you'll see the interactions. Watch some of. I know I've done podcast interviews with Eric and with virtually everybody on here. Go and watch on YouTube some of the information, starting with those folks, and that'll lead to others. And I think that's people that you trust are always a good place to start for weeding out that information. And as we found, I think sometimes what is claimed to be misinformation by some people is actually the information, and what was being reported as the information was the misinformation.
all right, so I think we're wrapping it up now, right? We're about out of time. I want to thank everyone on the panel for their contribution. I think it was a really good. Thank you for the audience for your questions, and everyone watching on the live stream, if there are anyone. I think there are. We had quite a few people. So, okay, well that's a start. Anyway, if you want to watch this video again, it is on YouTube. It's on the channel Balance My Hormones. Well, thanks again for being able to be the sponsor for this, and again, thanks to everyone else who were also sponsors and part of this. So thank you.